Welcome to Slash Bash, where today I am bringing you another malicious compliance Reddit video. In our first story, short me $70,000, it'll cost you $1.8 million. Let's jump right in. Here's a disclaimer, the names and some of the situations have been changed to protect the identities, for a very good reason, but the dollars and general nature of the situation is completely true. Here's the background. A year out of school in the early 1990s, I procured a job as a business analyst for a large family-owned tech company. This business was located in the booming heart of technology at the time and was very profitable. As tech took off over the next decade, the company thrived and remained family-owned. What was a rich family and company became exceedingly wealthy with a valuation net worth in the high 9 figures to low 10 figures. The family that owned it was quite neurotic, very moody, and had a reputation as very ruthless, greedy when it came to financing, deal-making, employees, etc. I truly believe this is what held them back from ultimately becoming a household name as a company. As I progressed in the company, I gained more and more face time with the owners. I worked on some projects directly with ownership that really paid off and gained me even greater access to their inner circle. Now, like a lot of people at the time, and particularly those who worked in tech, I was heavily invested in tech stocks. I discussed some of my investments and gains with ownership as casual conversation, though investing had nothing to do with my role in the company. That is until one day in late 1999 when the owner came to me and asked me if I would invest some of his personal money. He wanted me to take big risks to see if they would pay off using $1 million of his personal money. I was a bit hesitant, but still being in my late 20s and wanting to prove myself, I said I would. I asked for a written agreement where they acknowledged this wasn't my role in the company, was a personal matter between the owner and me, and to document my compensation for this side arrangement, 20% of all profits. Around this same time, and by working in the industry, I started to notice the weakness associated with a lot of tech companies. They just weren't living up to their hype and stock price, and some seemed like they were starting to run out of money. I had no inside information, just a strong sense of which companies were struggling based on my work in the business. Based on this sense, I started using both my money and the owner's money to short tech companies just after the new year in 2000. For anyone unfamiliar with shorting, it means if the value of a stock decreases, the value of the investment increases. I had a few long positions, but my overall position was very short. Since the owner wanted big risk and big reward, I used his money and obtained leverage or margin from the financial institution where I maintained both his and my trading accounts. The accounts were separate, but both under my name. Again, I documented this and gained consent. Well, both my account and his suffered some moderate losses in the first 2 months of 2000, before the bubble began to burst, and both accounts, but his in particular, began to skyrocket. Now on to the ownership's pettiness. In June, the company began to suffer a downturn. We were still profitable, but since we provided tech services and products, we were not immune to weakness in the broader market. I had not informed the owner of my short strategy. He came to me one day and asked how his money was doing, saying he suspected it was way down like the general market. To his surprise, I informed him that while we still had some money tied up in options, puts, and shorts, but based on the position I had closed, there was $1.35 million in cash sitting in the account that belonged to him. Again, I still had a bunch of open positions, which, if memory serves, were worth about $1 million on that date, but the positions I had closed had yielded $1.35 million in cash just sitting in his account, which was in my name. The owner, either through ignorance or lack of attention, said, "Great, $1.35 million. Fantastic work in this down market. Will you please wire it to me?" I responded that I would, but would be taking my 20% of the $350,000 profit, or $70,000, before wiring him the $280,000. I also reminded him I still had open positions that had yet to pay off or close, but I didn't state the amount. He once again appeared not to understand or comprehend the open position statement, but instead totally focused on and became incensed about my rightful claim for $70,000. He went on and on about how times were tough. I should be grateful for a job, particularly at my young age, and the entire $350,000 was necessary for him and the company. I knew this wasn't true based on my position within the company. Worse, this was my first time personally experiencing the greedy and corrupt nature that served as the basis for the ownership's reputation. Now comes the revenge. Since after 2 separate conversations, the owner didn't seem to grasp that the open positions would yield at least some income, and thus additional profit, I decided not to mention it again. I sent him back the entire $1.35 million and continued to manage the open positions to the best of my ability. And here's the kicker, the owner never brought it up again. He seemed to think the $1.35 million payment was the entire value of the account and never understood or remembered that open positions still existed. He never asked for records, tax documents, or any time of audit or financials. Given the fact that he was dishonest with me, I didn't feel the need to disabuse him of that notion. Ultimately, after a bit more net gain, I covered all of the shorts and exercised all of the options, puts in this case, for an additional $1.8 million. I worked for the company for 3 more years, and the owner never asked about it during my tenure after I gave notice or since. I know it's a bit crass and even shady as flip, but given his dishonesty with me over the $70,000, I felt justified in keeping the additional $1.8 million. I paid taxes on the gain, long-term capital gains, and went on my way with a fantastic nest egg. Nobody has asked about it since, and I have only told the story to a few people, and even then only after the statute of limitations passed. The final ironic cherry on top of this sundae is that during my remaining 3 years, I gained greater influence with ownership in position within the company because they considered me loyal for giving the $1.35 million back and not making too much of a stink about the $70,000 profit. Little did they know I got the better of them. The company eventually folded due to family disputes, but my understanding is that ownership walked away in very good financial position. They likely could have been a much better and greater company had they not practiced the same dishonesty that they showed me with their vendors, clients, and employees. Thanks for reading, and I hope you enjoyed. In story number 2, try to intimidate me by telling me to clock out and go home? No problem. I'll take over half your bartending staff with me. For almost 20 years, I was in the service industry. It helped in a lot of ways, but probably ended up sucking me into that lifestyle for too long. A large portion of my serving bartending career was at a chain restaurant. Think a house of steak that isn't in front. I had been with this establishment for around 5 years while going through college and starting a master's. I was working at my 4th location due to various moves for school. By this point, I was a server, bartender, trainer, and I had been approached multiple times about manager in training, but I politely declined. All of this to say I felt like I had a pretty good standing in history with the company. Well, one day a guy, let's call him Chad, who I personally disliked, started going through manager in training. Our mutual dislike started before my first day at work even, but to be concise, he was indirectly involved in a small confrontation between his friend, me, and the girl his friend was talking to. It's actually a pretty funny story in itself. If this blows up or people are interested, I'll tell it. Chad had a massive superiority, or is it inferiority, complex, probably rooted in his height. Not trying to be a dick or insensitive, but it's my best guess, and although we maintained civility at work, I'm pretty sure we were both aware that we didn't like each other. For several weeks, probably at least 2 months, bartenders weren't making money. For context, the bar area had around 9 booths arranged around the U-shaped bar in the center, but bartenders weren't allowed to take those tables, only guests seated at the bar. After several weeks of walking out with $40 to $50, including our bar tip out from servers, on a weekend shift, we all began pleading with management to help us. I know I and others asked for them to let us have at least a couple tables in the bar lounge. We're talking 10 feet from the bar. Given that bartending was something you almost always had to work up to, start at server, do well, you have a shot of moving up, we all felt like we had demonstrated the ability to handle the tables and not allow drink times or bar guests to suffer, especially as the actual bar was pretty dead most weekends, seeing as we were making so little. So when our request was denied, we were all offended to some degree, feeling like it was a double slap in the face of we don't care about you not making money and we don't trust you to handle lounge tables. Morale was low. One day after we voiced our concerns to deaf ears again, when the bar was of course slow, Chad basically orders me to do something like count inventory or some other busy work. At the time I was batching cocktails and doing bar upkeep, partially because when we got it done there was a decent chance one of us would be cut. Being cut meant 1, the person cut isn't wasting time for little pay, and 2, the person staying makes more money. So I kind of clipped back something like, I'm not doing that, I'm busy doing things at the bar. If you want it done, you should do it. At this point, I'm pissed because from my perspective, we've been pleading with them to help us. They told us to get flipped. Now you're wasting our time even more with stuff that isn't really our job responsibility, all while you literally stroll around the restaurant doing nothing. Chad, trying to flex his new manager in training position, says, if you're gonna have that attitude, you can clock out and go home. He clearly wasn't expecting me to simply go, okay, and immediately clock out. I turned to the other bartender, told them, I'm sorry, I was being sent home. Now, what Chad and the rest of management didn't know was that by pure chance, I had run into a former bartender that left months ago, when things had started to go south. She was at her new serving job and told me she was making great money, so the very next day I applied and used her as a referral. I got the job and immediately put in my 2 weeks at the House of Steak. The steakhouse proprietor sat me down during my next shift and basically attempted to make amends and ask if I was leaving because of Chad. I said no, I was leaving because we weren't making money and y'all refused to help us, which is true. The Chad stuff was annoying, but I've never been a person unable to work with those I don't personally like. Well, when the rest of the bartending staff heard about me leaving, they were curious about my new job. I told them the truth. I was making great money and they're hiring. Within 2 weeks, 6 of my former bartending crew left and got hired at the new job. Within another couple weeks, a few more joined. The House of Steak lost about 70% of their bartending crew and a few servers in the space of a month. They were definitely not pleased, mostly at my new manager, as that's just something you don't do, but not at me. And wouldn't you know it, a month later, bartenders were allowed to take lounge tables. This is John from Slash Bash. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed the video and want to see more of them, then hit that subscribe button. We would love for you to drop a like, share it with your friends, and we will see you in the next one.